Okay, now you're recording.
Meeting, comprehensive plan meeting of October 15th, 10 a.m., Dual School. Call to order. Ron Weber in attendance.
Diane Jetty.
Julia Decker, staff.
Victoria Sage, staff.
Pam Birmingham.
Thank you. Review of September 7th, 17th meeting.
Oh, we just
Summary. Okay. And joining us is
Connie Moore. Thank you.
go to
What?
would you review us on the September 17th meeting?
So read this everything?
Just review it.
Okay. Yes, September 17th. We talked about goal 2, which is land use planning. And we had a fair amount of discussion around land use planning. Susanna Gladwin wanted an explanation of different zones. And she asked that the wording for RA1 be changed as it carries a 2-acre minimum lot size, which is confusing.
Do you have a spare set?
She said the reference materials are not user-friendly. Discussion around using the web maps. Leanne Thompson explained that making these documents more user-friendly is what a comprehensive plan update process is designed to do. Ron asked the group for thoughts affecting land use in Clatsop County. Mr. Smith, William Smith, was here. He expressed his concern for the development of the Camp Eaton Logging Museum. And there was a fair amount of discussion around that. And Mr. Olson stated that issues presented in the LCGU planning area are very different from those in town. And there's a lack of representation for these areas and that the voices are not being heard. That's a summary. Oh, I haven't turned the page over. Anything on there you want me to highlight on? Oh, issues surrounding air quality and marijuana growing in the area were discussed. Connie expressed her concerns regarding public health issues stemming from vacationers, homeless, and illegal or mismanaged campfires. Anything else?
Mr. Olsted, we discussed this at the fire, was the fires that are started out in the woods, but people don't know what's dry or not. And they need to be educated to get that somehow coordinated with. Who would we coordinate that with? The Forest Service?
Fires in the woods,
Oregon
typically.
Department of Forestry.
There's a fire protection unit forester, Neil Bond. And Neil is maybe somebody you could chat with and ask that question of.
BOND?
B-O-N-D, Bond, Neil Bond.
And he's with who?
Oregon Department of Forestry.
I don't know if Smokey Bear is trademarked by the U.S. Forest Service. Is he?
Oh, yeah.
So I wonder if ODF, that's because that's one recognizable symbol that I think everybody knows, and you don't have to read a lot of fine print about fire safety. So Ron, that might be worth asking if ODF can maybe get some of those from the Forest Service.
Smokey the Bear is a recognizable symbol, and it is trademarked. However, anything that is government property belongs to the people of the United States. So, for example, any work that we do for the county is not copywritten in that way. I mean, you can use anything off a county website, anywhere, any state, so there shouldn't be an issue. It would just be if it were misused.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, I haven't watched regular TV in a really long time.
Good
so
for you.
Maybe somebody can help me with this. when I grew up, many years ago in ancient times, Smokey the Bear was on the TV all the time. I mean, I can remember from the time I was in the, at least in the second and third grade, I mean, it was a constant thing, preventing forest fires. Only you can prevent forest fires. I did continue to watch TV up until a few, at least 10 years ago, maybe, or so, and I just didn't see it anymore. I mean, am I missing something? I just don't. I feel that the symbol of his message is, I don't feel like it's out there in front as much as it used to be.
And I don't know if younger people, now that you say that,
I bet they don't know who he is.
they may not.
Sure.
See, I think,
I'd be
we
sure.
know, we just see that symbol, but I don't know.
We can get, I'll call this guy, if we can get the bear cut out, we can put him in all the fire stations,
Would that be
right up
nice?
by the road. Yeah, right.
Cute. Yeah.
Something that I noticed that's at the Napa, actually I guess it's the Burnside Fire Station. That's one of the fire stations, John Day maybe. They have a sign beside the road. It says fire danger today, and there's the green, yellow,
Yes.
red, and orange, or whichever order it goes. And so it's like low, medium, high. And so anyway, somebody does go out and set the needles.
Yes.
Well,
On the seaside.
We
yeah.
have one right in front of on Highway 26.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I talked with, though it's out of my area, I know a lot of people in the Mist Birkenfeld area, and I admire the work that the Mist Birkenfeld fire people do, and just because not that your district isn't doing well, but I just they're just the people I know, and one of the things I admire is, like, if somebody's going to do a burn at their place, they come out and inspect that pile, and it just seems like they're a very active part of the community. And I'm comparing it not with Elsie, but with Hamlet. And it may just be a matter of the size of the community and the amount of resources available to make that happen. But where I'm headed with it is that, so I stopped in one day, talked to the Miss Birkenfeld fire people, and they said that thing with the different colors, the needle, it belongs to the Forest Service. It doesn't belong to them. And because I was thinking, wow, you've got this, why don't we have this? And Heather. Hey.
Come in.
Hi there.
Gentlemen's here, and if you two want to.
So, I was kind of thinking about something for the Hamlet area, because there's two fire stations for Hamlet. There's the one on 26, and then there's the one on Hamlet Road. And so I was thinking, at least the one on 26. Now, there is a thing with the needle a couple miles down 26 from the fire station, but nothing at the fire station. Then I found out it really is a Forest Service thing. So.
We have two guests. Could you say who you are, please?
Brady here from Seaside.
Minnie Claflin from
I'm sorry, who?
Minnie Claflin.
Minnie?
Yes.
And Brady?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
terrific.
Could I have an urgent?
Oh, they have some.
What you got? We're right in there somewhere. Actually, we're over here. Yes, I'll get a hold of Mr. Bond, see what's up. And any more thoughts, questions, or concerns about the reviewing the summary?
I have a note
Yes, ma'am.
at Elderberry Inn and Baker's and Camp 18. They're kind of substituting for Smokey Bigfoot, and he has all kinds of sayings. They have
That's
little
right.
coasters, and he has all kinds of sayings about, don't start fires and keep Sasquatches home safe and don't bring them out. That's cute. Yeah.
Okay. Report on the countywide CAC liaison.
That's you.
No clue. That was I didn't keep that good notes, but that they are going to do agriculture again because there was so much to cover. Read it. Andy brought up a bunch of points about how the land has, see how you put that, the agricultural land has went down from years past, and that but the amount of usage of input of what's on the land has went up, which was really impressive. I thought that was pretty good, just based on what they were doing.
This is
Pardon?
who is this?
This was this part right here.
The liaison.
There's another meeting right here. It's on Thursday. Actually, it's over at Storage really good.
So Ron Weber?
That's me. But,
So who's Andy you were referencing?
he's the chairman of that group.
Oh.
Andy Davis, I know.
Okay, all right.
They went around, let's see, they got into marijuana grow guy. Oh, the gal in the water districts did a PowerPoint presentation that was really impressive. The one thing, I gleaned at it from our use, you can get a hold of them for weed control, which is really good, which I'm going to do.
So classic soil and water.
Correct.
Yeah.
Went around the table. The gentleman from, is that beside me? Cannon Beach, I think it was. Real go-getter. And what was interesting is they made petitions in their own group to petition this group, the CAC group. I didn't know you could do that. Could you do that? I guess.
Petition to do what?
Oh, yeah, like 6 things.
Specific
They made
to
they
Canada
had a
Beach.
forum and they made a petition to change this into the comprehensive plan from our group. It makes a suggestion.
Well, that's sort of the point of these
Sure.
meetings is we're going to be taking input from all of the groups, and that's what the countywide is. That's the intention of the countywide. So they're just maybe a little bit ahead of.
Oh, he was like
Yeah.
really organized. They had it down to real specific stuff that they wanted to put up for.
So motions that they've made?
Yep. That was nice. Have those minutes also.
Well, they'll be up, but they usually don't come out until about a week before the next meeting. So,
That's
yeah, and then they actually, sorry to interrupt a little bit, but the next meeting for the countywide, I think, isn't going to be until November because they were actually ahead of all the other groups, and since they're made up of the other groups, they're getting ahead. But there is going to be, in lieu of the next meeting, this Thursday, there's the presentation from the Oregon Department of Forestry. So they're going to be talking about the Forest
I
Practices
didn't know
Act.
that. We were going to go forest thing anyway.
So that's
At
Thursday.
3.
Yeah, so that's Thursday.
We just figured it'd roll right into the meeting. No.
No, it is just the
Okay, so
presentation.
at 3 o'clock.
The forestry meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, the presentation.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But were you saying, so the agriculture, I was at the agriculture one that preceded that. You said they're going to do another one because,
There was so much information.
excellent, yeah, good.
So that would be the November one. Yes.
The countywide
Yes.
meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
good.
not a presentation like you went to.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Oh,
There's meetings of the groups, and then to help us all learn, the county's put together presentations. We had one about land use planning and,
They're real helpful.
yeah, bringing in
that's what I was at.
Yeah, the DLCD.
experts so that we're a little more informed before we have our actual meeting. So the 17th is a presentation by ADF forestry, because that'll be what we discuss.
Okay.
That makes it clear.
But isn't that what he was saying, that there's going to be another agriculture?
That's what, and when is that?
No, I think,
That's
if I understand, the countywide group decided to continue their
Yes.
discussion. There's not going to be another presentation.
Oh,
Oh, okay.
But it's going to be a continuation of the discussion, because I think they didn't cover a lot
Oh,
what they
yeah.
wanted to.
When was that discussion?
That was September 17th. And then the next one,
But
on that discussion, is
presentation-
going to be November, the third Thursday.
Okay.
Any idea what's coming after? So the forest one is Thursday at 3.
Hmm.
Any idea what the next one is?
The next meeting?
The next summary thing? Like that?
Oh, the next DLCD
Yeah.
presentation? The only presentation that I know that's upcoming is the one on Thursday.
Okay.
But we're kind of going to take a little bit of a break over the holidays, give everyone some breathing space. We're going to get through goal 4, so we'll be meeting next month, and then we'll probably take, I think, just maybe December and January off, so staff has a little time to kind of take everything that we've discussed and start to work on actually
Okay.
making findings.
Making some findings, putting some language together, and then bringing these things back to you so that you have the opportunity to go through them and fine tune it, what you had in mind. Make sure we captured everything. You probably have some aha moments where you go, you know what, we should have put that in there. So do some fine tuning and then take it back to the CAC. So it'll go back and forth a little bit. But that's what we would expect to see happening after the first of the year. So we'll get some draft work together, bring some things back to you for your review, and then we'll be getting into Goal 5 with you. And Goal 5 is massive. It covers a lot of different things. And so I'm guessing it'll take a couple of months itself. And I would expect more presentations at that point from all kinds of various state agencies. We'll probably be talking with folks from hazards and probably the Department of State Lands regarding wetlands, probably the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. I mean, you can expect probably several presentations on that.
Goal 5 is forestry.
No, Goal 5, that's Goal 4. Goal 5 is basically natural resources, and I forgot the exact language in it, but it covers so many different things, so many different aspects.
Okay.
Do you have the goal list, Andy?
Not handy, but I can find it.
You want to look, you want me to?
I was just going to show you that. Seaside. This is the LC Seaside group. Combine this both. And that's Seaside. Kansas is Seaside. Where they go, correct?
I know. I live out here.
I consider rural seaside,
There you go. Sorry.
so that's why I'm thinking Nehalem. You know, I would imagine you're in that area.
Hey, Ron.
Is that it? I don't think so.
Perfect.
Are you down on the lower hill? Are you down on the lower hill?
Well, no, I'm on Beerman Creek Lane, and Mindy is very active with the farm, so we kind of, that's the association. But she lives actually in the Haven.
You down at beach?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, okay. So that would be the person to coordinate really
Okay.
on the end here. And then, that's a great idea. So you need more people.
I need more people, that's what I'm thinking of.
And the application, which expires,
It expired.
It expired.
Friday.
Yeah, I
Can
think
we
it's already
reopen
gone.
it, or?
That's a Gail question, I'm not sure.
Okay, well, you know, the reason I had originally asked her about, being able to bring somebody on, but I've had, based on, some of the interactions in our meetings, based on some things that are happening outside of here in my personal life right now, it's like I really wanted to make sure that, there's a lot of intelligent people out there, but, it needs to also be somebody that, is open to listening to all the different concerns, ideas, that kind of thing. And there's, I'll just say that right now I'm working, with a situation that is totally opposite of that. And so I didn't want to, I didn't want to just reach out to anybody. So that's why I just didn't, toss somebody into the ring. I mean, I want somebody that's going to, add to the productive nature of this project, and and that can help keep it positive and moving forward. And I just didn't have that person.
So I'm concluded with the liaison report, and next time I'm going to do this minute. Sorry. Goal 3 overview.
Okay, so goal 3 deals with agricultural lands. So what we're talking about is protecting farmlands, which we do on a local level through zoning, for the local land use zoning ordinance. So specifically the EFU, which is the exclusive farm use zone, and then the agriculture forestry AF zone also is closely connected with the EFU. A lot of regulations in the EFU zone is set by the state statutes, so we are actually very limited on what we can change. The state is very protective, and rightfully so, of farm and forest lands, so it's difficult if you want to change them and convert to a housing or commercial, just non-farming use. Yes, Con?
Well, I don't know if this is the right time, and I actually, my schedule's just been so crazy, but I tried to call the planning department because, it feels sad as I drive by this one area on Hamlet Road. All the trees are gone now, and I thought, well, it looked like maybe they were doing some mitigation, almost like what's happening on 26, a little bit closer to Seaside. It looked like they were going to do some things related to, wildlife and tree combination. All of a sudden, there's this huge platform of gravel, and it's all just within what feels like, I may be exaggerating, feet of the river. And then I hear in the out in the kind of out in the wind amongst other neighbors that somebody's putting a welding shop in. So how can that happen when one of my neighbors can't even split the old time property that I think the folks have had since they were since the Hamlet first settled, can't even split it so his son can have it. It's just I can't I've been around for the 96 flood, and actually the water came up quite a ways on Hamlet Road in 98, 99. There was still the water table was still very high. I don't quite understand how, if you've got, whether it's a barn or it's a welding shop or it's somebody's giant garage, how do you keep stuff out of the river?
Well, that's what the FEMA, that's what FEMA handles, but.
And also riparian setback.
And there's should be a 50-foot setback.
I don't know if you know what site she's talking
No,
about.
I don't.
It's horrible what they did so close to the river. It just.
Yeah, and I don't know how it was
that's
approved.
RA5, I think. It's not one of these zones. It's not a farm or forest zone. You can see there's a house there.
Yeah, but the
Well,
house.
RA is an agricultural zone.
Right, but it
But it's
allows
also residential.
houses and accessory dwellings like a shop,
Mhm.
if it's used for welding or whatever, kind of as an outright use. It's a
It's not
residential
exclusive,
agricultural.
yeah.
Thing that concerned me on that one is the proximity. They stripped that to bare, loose dirt, pretty much right up to the river's
Yeah,
edge.
yeah, and I remembered Riparian, but I kept thinking, you said RR, so I was thinking Riparian, and I could never think of the second word. But I called the county, and my schedule just didn't line up with somebody being able to talk to me back. But I'm just, since this topic came up, I thought, okay, here's one in real time that so that means they're just grandfathered in with the rule,
Well, but
with
they can build
with the
a
R5.
shop,
Yeah.
but maybe not the placement. I mean, these guys
Yeah,
are more the
yeah.
expert. Who enforces a riparian setback?
Well, we do through the code, but we defer to Department of State Lands. They're the ones who handle riparian wetland areas. We look for a 50-foot setback on the site plan, and that's kind of,
Well,
That's the most
having
we
been
can
through
do.
the 96 flood, I remember talking to Gene, who's now, of course, deceased, as my partner and I were driving up to my place, and the water was up to the bridge, coming up onto and I wasn't worried about my safety, but I'm just remembering it was up over the bridge, just basically a mile or less from where they're putting this welding shop. And of course, I don't remember in my mind where the water was at that spot. But the water was, way up that particular winter.
yeah.
About in 96?
Huh?
Are you saying in 96?
Well, 96 was the big flood, and then it seemed to me, I live both where I live now and also in Mist Bergenfeld area, and the water just, I don't know if it had to do with the climate at that moment or with the water table, but it just seemed like we kept, and it was happening even on the Tualatin River. There were just these mini floods over and over again for like 2 or 3 years. In fact, I went to put my well in spring of 99, and the drilling hole, because of the water table, kept washing out at my original well site.
Let's
So,
stay on topic. Any more staff stuff?
Sure. So, if that had been like an EFU or an AF property, it's possible they would have had to take a goal exception to put that commercial use, but it's a residential commercial use. There are ways to do it, to put a house, but you have to meet certain requirements that are mandated by the state. So it's just, again, they try to make it very difficult, but in the case of the RA5 zone, there are, more residential, and that would have been like a home occupation or something, or perhaps if it's just for personal use, the welding shop. So we have Brady Gert here, and he's a local farmer, and we asked him to just kind of give us his, farmer and residence expertise and just do a little presentation, but it doesn't have to be formal. We can make it more of a conversation, just, take the pressure off, but I'll throw it over to Brady for a little while.
Sure.
And that actually picks up really well from the center of the room.
So, I guess to introduce myself, I'm originally from Clatskanie, and my family is from between Clatskanie and Seaside through Jewel. Some of you might know Severn, have known Severn Gert, that's my uncle, and I had some relatives that the old lumber yard in Seaside was owned by my grandpa's cousins. They were Gerts, and then they sold to Bran to another family, bought it from them in the 50s, and then it ended up burning down. That's kind of around where the city shop is, I think now, pretty close to there. So, so my grandpa was raised up on the hill in the headwaters of the Clatskanie River, and he started out, he wanted to be a farmer. They were in the middle of forest land, and he and his father and his brothers ran a shingle mill, and they would go into the woods and pull out down cedar and cut it into shingles and sell them to the different, to everybody that needed shingles. And then Simon Benson came along and ran some kind of successful scheme that ended up, he used the donation land claim laws to own all the land within 5 or 10 years. So he ended up owning essentially all the remaining forest land in Clatskanie and Cathlamet, which was a community at that time. There was, it was Mist, Birkenfield, Jewel, Clatskanie, and Cathlamet were like a really, a pretty cohesive producing community, agriculturally producing community. And so then within the course of about 10 or 20 years, all the old growth was logged in the region, and that lumber went to through the Depression there were jobs, and there was really no depression, I think, in the area because there was so much work. But all the product went to Portland and San Diego, and later on there was a philanthropic organization that was set up by the Benson family, and all the funds from the philanthropy, none of that went to this region. It all went to San Diego and Portland. So it's interesting that there was a period of 20 years where there was employment, and the end result was the livelihood of my grandfather, as the shingle mill and all that was lost. And but he wanted to be a farmer, so he slowly worked his way down the valley until he got to the really good prime farmlands, and he bought a farm, and he farmed for the rest of his life then. And that's probably why I wanted to be a farmer, because I looked up to my grandpa. And so from a young age, I had gardens, and I was the one that milked the cow when the cow needed to be milked, or whatever, anything that had to do with farming. I trained horses, and then when I got to be 16, we moved over to Spokane, and I drove a combine and a grain truck, and just learned about a lot of different kinds of agriculture. We moved to Utah for a little while. There was quite a cultural barrier there, but my dad got his pilot's license, and in Utah, as just a little kid, I followed a farmer around there that had 160 acres, and he irrigated it all with little ditches, and I would stand on the back of his tractor. He would pick me up at 6 o'clock every morning, and we would go out and irrigate all the fields, and that was when I was in 3rd grade. So that's a little background, and so I was very interested in the woods, the farming, ecology in general. So I almost went and studied agriculture at Western Washington University, but I couldn't get into their environmental engineering program. And then I kind of rethought it and decided, I'm not that math-oriented. So I got into Washington State University in the agriculture program, and I studied, I got a dual degree in agronomy and soil science, and diversified agriculture, or agroecology. And some of the things that we did there was soil health. I did some work with soil health and worked in the weed science department, and helped to lay the groundwork for their organic agriculture program that they started a little while later. And then I wanted to go overseas I wanted to go do humanitarian work in agriculture. And I decided I wanted to go to Kyrgyzstan, to the nomadic peoples of Central Asia, and I ended up working there for several years, doing rural development and agricultural assistance, because the Soviet Union, they were essentially a sustainable nomadic agricultural community for over 4,000 years in a mountainous region where the mountains go up to 27,000 feet. And the Soviets were able to take over the region, and within 70 years, the area was environmentally devastated because of the change in practice from their nomadic herding style to a more where they limited the Soviets limited the types of livestock to cattle and sheep, and they had quotas, and that's what drove the environmental destruction over the course of 70 years. So sustainable for 4,000 years, and then in 70 years, they're recovering from that. So that was the work that I did, helping like another generation that in 70 years, a generation can forget a lot of knowledge that was present. And so I did seed projects, and some of the projects were as simple as like wells and outhouses. If you're tapping into the same profile, it's not a very good idea, right? So, and then some things were as complicated as like trying to find seeds that fit a little village that's called, one village was called White Ice. That was the translation of the name of the village. So it's challenging to find the right seed varieties to fit a village called White Ice. But it's interesting that now I'm reading a book that's called The Art and Science of Shepherding. And now people all over, young people all over are getting excited about the art and science of shepherding, for example, among many other things, which you wouldn't expect if you're not in the loop of things. But the art and science, shepherding, from the example of the Kyrgyz people, the difference between the devastation of the landscape over 70 years or the sustainable and regenerative effect on the landscape over 4,000 years was the shepherding. The skill, the science, the artisanship, the ability to connect with what the sheep, yaks, horses, cows, being healthy, but then returning the next year to more grass, to more forage, to more of the things that keep them healthy. And by the way, no livestock are healthy from just eating grass. They need all different kinds of herbs, and they pick that out on their own. So, jumping around a little bit, but let's see what else. So I returned from humanitarian aid, and I think one of the reasons why I didn't initially get excited about farming here in my home place was because of all the different hoops and hurdles that are put before, especially small-scale farmers. And so, but when I did return, I decided, you know what? I took up a challenge that I thought, well, okay, I want to get some soil science experience. So I worked in a lab for a few years. And I worked for Greenwood Resources, managing 15,000 acres of their, not forest land, it was of their plantation lands. And just gave me an understanding of larger scale, landscape scale land management. And at the same time, I was starting a farm on leased land in Klatskanai on about 72 acres. So I had an idea from everything that I'd seen to do an agroecological farm that would be certified organic, but agroecological, which is a word that people always need a little bit of definition around. So if you think of ecology and you think of cycles, where everything is cycling together, ecology is kind of like the magic that changes entropy. Entropy is that law of thermodynamics that everything is in a state of degradation. Entropy is the magic that turns that upside down and makes things regenerative and build up over time. Desertification is entropy. Good farming is syntropy. And there's actually a movement in Brazil for syntropic agriculture that started by a Swiss immigrant in Brazil. But syntropy and entropy. Syntropy is with the magic of ecology. Entropy is when ecology is failing or when you don't have that going on. So agroecology is the ecology. So old school ecology kind of takes people out of the picture, right? Old school ecology says, okay, we're just parasites. We need to either preserve stuff or we need to mess it up. And that's what we kind of, maybe that's the past realistic way of looking at things. Like people tend to get involved and mess up ecology, mess up, diversity of species go down. So with agroecology, the idea is that we can be productive in the ecology and syntropic. So we are another species. Ecology is strong when there's a diversity, and the greater the diversity, once it comes to a level, everything, when you throw it all together, it has to kind of wash. The wash has to run, and it comes out into a mix. And once it all washes out, the greater diversity there is, the more resilience there is, the stronger the system is over the long term. In a world that's all different things. Like there's the floods, there's the droughts, there's the spruce aphids, there's the whatever. Diversity is what makes it strong. So people are part of the natural diversity of the landscape, and agroecology is a way to bring that back into it, and also talks a little bit about the productive nature that people always have. So we can't just, if we say we're going to be museum keepers and we're going to throw people into a situation, and that's also an old school concept that's not sustainable. Sustainable implies economically, ecologically, hydrologically, geologically. Sustainable implies all those things. So to say that we're going to conserve without being productive is not a sustainable concept. It wouldn't be for a squirrel, it wouldn't be for a frog, it wouldn't be for a beaver, it wouldn't be for a person, right? So agroecology is the agro is the connection to the people being productive in the landscape. And agroecology is based on the net effect of people being involved, being positive towards. So a footprint implies a negative. Agroecology is like, not only is there not a footprint, but there's a positive effect. So that's a good thing. and this is the evolution of agriculture to where we are today in 2019. We have a lot of residual agriculture going on that's still degenerative to the landscape, degenerative to water tables. For example, our most productive in Washington and Oregon, we have the highest yields of, for example, potatoes in the world, and have for probably 30 years and running. The highest yields of potatoes in the world, but at the same time, the aquifer underneath those potatoes is so high in nitrates that we've also had 30 years in running of blue baby syndrome as a regular occurrence for the farm workers that live in the region where they produce the potatoes. And blue baby syndrome is when nitrate that's in the groundwater replaces the oxygen in the blood, and the baby is born essentially suffocating. So they're born blue. And this has been something that, it's been going on steadily. And the reason they look past it is probably because they're growing they have so much value in all the different crops that are being grown that they're like, well, okay, but the fact remains that it's a type of agriculture that is degrading and creating deserts. But in that case, okay, so that's another point. I guess I'm just yakking on and on, but
No, it's great.
Can I segue into something?
What?
That's really good. We're going to jump into this discussion here. The first one on there, how does zoning affect farming in Clatsop County? You want to hit on that?
okay. So, jumping right off of the highest yields in the desert areas, okay? So if you take our climate and you compare it to the Columbia Basin, you take soil and you compare it to sand, you take a complex system and you make it and you oversimplify it. So agriculture, what has been typical and what dominates agriculture is very similar to hydroponics. It's just provide the nutrients fast enough as they go through into the groundwater. Provide enough water, have plenty of sun, have total control over the weather. It simplifies the system. We don't have that in our county at all. We have a complex system, and if you don't have the knowledge of how to farm in this area, then it'll be very discouraging. It takes a lot of artisan skill to farm in Clatsop County. Okay, so there are people traveling, there's a whole generation of millennial superstars that are traveling all over the world, getting experience in climates all over the world, seeing how people farm, working and living on farms and learning. It's a huge trend where you could go to any city and 1 in 10 people is involved in this. So that's a beautiful thing in the sense that we're in a diverse area that's hard to farm. That's the old, like in Clatsop, for example, they said, well, you can't grow anything, you can't grow any grain crops except for oats. You can't do this, you can't, the list of things you couldn't do was this long, and if you were like, oh, okay, well, that's the knowledge in the area, so it must be true. So, in Clatsop, I kind of tested that knowledge, and I grew, for example, when the blue scorcher wanted wheat, I grew them wheat. 13,000 pounds a week for the blue scorcher. They paid for the seed, I grew it for them, and everybody said you couldn't, and it was the first time around, it was successful, it was very easy. And then I grew all different kinds of grain just to see, flax is a regional. There's just so many different crops that grow very well in our region. But you learn, for example, I grew wheat for the Blue Scorcher Bakery, and it was low protein wheat. It had very little gluten in it. Sounds good, but it's really hard to make a consistent loaf of bread. But the thing I learned was, that was my baseline. The second time that I grew wheat, then I saw that you had to provide more nitrogen for more fertilizer in general. And this is organic farming, so. But at a certain time in the spring, the wheat starts to, it starts out thinking, okay, I can make a huge crop. So it kind of in its internal intelligence says, I'm going to do all these things to prepare for a huge crop. And then later in the spring, after it's been raining all winter and nitrogen is deficient, then it's not able to, nitrogen is necessary to make the protein, so it's not able to make enough protein, so it ends up as a low protein wheat because so to compensate for that, there's certain artisan skill that has to fit this area. And every crop is like that. So what I'm getting at is that I had the example of Monet. Monet has this artisan skill. Monet had this artisan skill, right? So there's all these masterpieces of Monet. If Monet had too much baggage when the inspiration came, there might be no paintings by Monet. He might have never become an artist. And that's the same with, in our county, we aren't the place where you just go out and farm and be successful. We're the place where you go out and farm and everything grows and is inconsistent and you can grow things very well, but you can't succeed as a farmer very easily in our region. So we need, I think, that's my point, I guess, that as a comprehensive plan, we're looking at agriculture. I think, what should it look like? Maybe it's decades before there's another comprehensive plan. So it's not 1950 right now. It's not 1970, it's 2019. We know so much about what worked and what didn't work especially over the last recent decades. What's not working right now? You could look at a map of the world and you could see, within 50 years, you could see, the deserts have expanded massively just in the last 50 years. And And we need to make a comprehensive plan that addresses the realities the way we understand them today, I guess is the point of that. So zoning, for example, you know what I think I'm talking too much.
Can I ask a quick question on something?
Yeah.
Back to the Klaskanaya list.
Yeah.
When you said the crops that they said these crops you can't grow, is it just you can't grow them because they didn't see them as a viable crop for that area, or couldn't grow them for some other regulatory?
You said they couldn't.
Yeah, okay, that's a good question, because really the reason you can't grow them is because 1 in 5 years you succeed.
Oh.
But if you have if you understand, and there's like this knowledge within the community of how to grow these crops, you succeed 5 out of 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So in the way of thinking about it, if you bring a farmer from Eastern Washington that has very little variables to work with, I mean very little variables to manage, it's like the holistic management scheme is very simple. For our region, the holistic management scheme is very complicated.
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the artist palette of Monet, where you have so many colors that it takes to make this masterpiece. And to handle all those colors takes an incredible amount of poise and I guess it takes a lot of skill. And in our region, to farm successfully here, it takes a lot of skill. It doesn't, I could go out and anybody could do it for a season, but a local food system doesn't happen because somebody can do it for a year or two.
No.
It happens because we establish this.
Do you have a comment on how does zoning affect Clatsop County?
The zoning, okay, maybe I'm addressing it wrong. So zoning, for example, in our region,
Yep.
everything is agricultural, because forest land is any forest land can be converted to agriculture. And ODF just does the forms and it's converted. So all of our region that we're talking about is all agricultural, essentially, right? It's either RA or it's F, or it's forest agriculture.
C.
Yeah, I mean, like mine's ag forest. Mine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there are certain residential
So the private.
zones where farming isn't an allowed use.
No.
You know, like in kind of rural communities and such.
Well, it isn't
But
that.
in our
Outright farming, like you have a pig farm or something like that.
Yeah, but that's
But you can
actually
grow.
pretty minor. I mean, honestly, any of the RA1, RA2, RA5 zones, that's residential agriculture. Any of those, farming is allowed. EFU, obviously, it's primary. AF, agriculture, forestry, again, agriculture. Forestry, yes, forestry can be converted. I'm trying to think of, I mean, you can put a garden for your own use, Andy, anywhere.
But how about commercial?
But commercial farming,
Yeah.
mostly you're going to, I mean, you need a certain amount of land. Typically, you're going to want at least an acre or two.
Mhm.
But you can do some very small boutique stuff with greenhouses and things like that. But, I mean, mostly we're not limited to where people do it. Some of the things I would think that Brady's running into are some of the prescriptions about living on the land that you're trying to farm, for example, because that's difficult. It's hard to put a farmhouse on farmland if it isn't already there. And we also have a lot of people who move here from someplace else and they see these lovely expanses of land, maybe with an old farm on it, and they want to move there and live there, but they don't want to farm, so they take it out of farm use, but they live there because the house is already there. So we see a lot of that sort of thing. So the farmland actually then goes out of farm use while somebody is simply using this lovely old farmhouse as a dwelling. So, and then you have somebody like Brady who'd like to live on the property and farm it, and I think you've run into a few things that have kind of slowed you down. Maybe you want to address those.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think.
Oh, and he's on the farm, by the way.
So I guess the point was that it's essentially our entire area that's within the 4 and 5 is almost all farmable. If it's forest land, like I said, it can be converted. So the priority, I think it's important to look at the intention. What was the intention? It wasn't that it's permissible to farm. All of it is not only permissible to farm, it's the intended use of that land. So for farm, forest, and because I'm talking agroecology, we've essentially melded those two together. Because when you're talking about agroecology, you're talking about an ecological system. So my situation is that I have to say something to start it out, that I made a commitment when I was younger to identify with whatever I did to identify with poor people. So, and then that's part of the reason I went overseas to work, and I have a nonprofit organization as well. And what I always look at is not if somebody had the ability to hire these different people to get through these loopholes and stuff, would they be able to do it? But it's what would a poor person be able to do in this exact situation? So if and I think with the zoning, it's pretty straightforward. Our comprehensive plan needs to facilitate anybody that wants to farm in a sustainable way, and I think we can add in the sustainable side because we're in 2019, we're not in 1950. So if somebody wanted to farm in a way that's damaging to the environment, then that should be part of the comprehensive plan to discourage environmentally damaging agriculture or environmentally damaging forestry, no matter how much profit comes from it. If it's damaging water systems, then it can't happen in our county. So the zoning means that we have to, by Oregon state law, facilitate farming for those young millennials that are learning all over how to farm, to be able to settle on the land and begin farming if Oregon state law allows it, and we need to reduce our regulations that would conflict with that.
Can I something leaked out at me based on something that you said, and it was here where it says the total overall acreage of the farmland and the average size of the farms has declined. This is for Clatsop County since 1978. So I thought originally, my little 18-year-old brain back then, I thought that, the whole idea was to preserve the best lands that are, meant for farming or meant for forestry. That was all part of the land use planning, and was to make sure that those, this is of course, maybe Ivory Tower or something, but that we were to, make sure we had that land available for farming or forestry based on what its best and prime use is. So what's confusing me, and I'm thinking it goes in with what's being said here, is that if somebody wants to, doesn't want to farm and there's a nice house there, that they can just live in the house and not farm. And is that one of the reasons this is declining? What's causing us to lose our farmland?
Well, there's probably a few things going on. We do see farmlands being converted to other uses, and the question I would probably have thrown out there is what's causing the conversion. And I've asked this in other groups as well, and some of the things that we've come up with. There's a few things. That type of a conversion, I don't even think that's tracked, because the zoning stays the same, and they might hay it or something like that, and that's it. So it's still technically considered farm use. They may even have some sort of a farm exemption tax-wise for it, but they're not actively, doing anything truly productive. They're just more or less letting it lie fallow or just, using it for hay. So that's not probably part of the conversion process. But, there's some other things that might be in the conversion. For example, we've had Measure 49 claims. You remember Measure 37 gave way to Measure 49. So some of those lands took farmlands and converted them. We didn't have a lot of huge conversions like they have in other areas, but we've had a couple, three, that all of a sudden increased density on production lands. Somebody mentioned, and I hadn't thought about it, some of the restoration projects, like up in the Brownsmead area and in the estuary areas, some of those restoration projects actually kind of reduced a little bit of farmland because now it's more tidally influenced. Somebody mentioned extension of the urban growth boundaries. Yeah, a little bit. So what's happening is it gets chunked out in little pieces. It's nibbled at over time. So we have, little things. We've got a subdivision over here that was a conversion because of Reg 49, and we've got an extension of a UGB over there, and just little pieces. So it gets nibbled away. And over 20 or 30 years, yeah, there is a change. But it's happened slowly in little increments, and we didn't notice it at the time, but if you look at Time Capsule style, you'd go, wow, there's 1,000 acres. The city of Seaside, the school district moved up on the hill, and they took a chunk of forest land and converted that, and it put it into the UGB so that they can, and I support getting the children out of the flood zone.
Totally.
But those sorts of things, those are little chunks, little nibbles that are taking it. So that would be my example of where they're going. And those are things that people mention in some of these different CACs, but if you have other ideas that add to it, you might have some other
I think it's
observations.
financial in a lot of ways. With how can you compete with industrial farming, and to farm
Well,
like you're
there's
doing
definitely an
takes
idea.
time.
Well,
It takes time, it takes money. I've got 20 acres and I'm growing trees on most of it, but I've got about a 4 or 5 acre pasture that is just sitting there with nothing on it, because when you're working full time, you can't. Maybe if I was younger, I'd have the energy to do something with it. But it's expensive, it's hard, it's time consuming, and if you're out working full time.
But fallow is not bad.
What?
Fallow is not bad.
Poultry?
No, fallow.
Oh, fallow.
Just letting it sit. Yeah, I
Poultry?
mean the elk and deer graze there. That's.
Julie, I think what you said, like that is true, like and the financial side, like I was bringing in that there's a lot of people who want to farm, and that's not necessarily something everybody knows or accepts, but in the circles that I know, there's so many people that want to farm, but they don't have access to the land. The Food and Agriculture Organization calls it land tenure. Whether you own it, whatever, it's just access to the land. If you had access to the land, can you farm? If you can't farm without building a $100,000 house, then you can't farm. That's the county policy, but that's not the state policy. The state policy is, first and foremost, the cart before the horse is, what's the land for? It's for farming? Okay, you can farm. What are the standard farming practices? You can do those. Those can't be limited by county regulation, for example. So, one of the reasons I think that we see the land conversion is that those who want to farm can't farm because they've got too many barricades in front of them. Those who want to develop the land have so many financial motivations to do that. So, for example, on the property that I'm working with, the most financially powerful thing to do would be to build a very fancy house on this property, and the county, that would fit all the codes perfectly. But if I decided instead to live very simply until I had cash flow, which is nobody's going to okay a business plan for farming. Like if you built that, then the premise of that is the value is in somebody, like for example, the neighbors' houses are worth $500,000 or $600,000. Well, they're right next door, The whole property didn't cost that much. And so for me, looking at saying, okay, I'm going to set all that aside because I have different priorities, and then to have the zoning all fits for, like for example, if you wanted to if you bought 200 acres in the middle of anywhere in the county, and you wanted to farm on that land, the zoning allows it. That's straightforward. The 200 acre, I'm saying, is a minimum in forest land. The zoning allows it, and ODF will convert it to farm. With just all you have to do is request. You say, "This is what I want to do." It's written into your forestry plan. There's some. And one point of that is that, like I said, I had 72 acres before that I managed for 10 years. Well, 50 acres of that was in forestry, 20 acres was in farming, there was a riparian area, but on 20 acres I raised 500,000 pounds of potatoes and all these other crops as well. I mean, 500,000 pounds of potatoes, and there was still 50 acres of forest on that. And a lot of other crops as well, like, for example, carrots. I had like 400 bunches of carrots to new seasons every week. And so 10 acres of prime farmland can be really productive. But I think, I'm getting back to the thing that the reason that it's converting, it's a complicated issue, but a lot of it has to do with a bureaucratic process that doesn't promote farming and doesn't enable poor people to farm. It enables rich people to farm.
Yeah.
And the poor people are the ones who want to be artisan farmers. I'm not saying poor people like just the victims of addiction and all this kind of stuff. I'm talking people that just have not prioritized money. They've prioritized ideals and the things they believe in. And they want to go and farm in an ecologically fantastic way that would be regenerative, but they don't have financial resources, and we shouldn't put that as the first bar. First you have to have all your money ahead of time, and then you can farm. Well, we're never going to have a local food economy then. And that's the point of our planning and our comprehensive plan, is to enable a better future, a more secure future, where people farm in the best possible way.
And you need a house there, you need the ability to live on the land. I mean, if it's hard to prove you need a house on forestry land, like, oh, I need to watch my trees grow. I mean, if they're already growing, you don't maybe need to live there. But if you're farming, it's pretty labor intensive. And so in these ag zones, AF and EFU, and I know you said it's regulated at the state level, so it's hard to get a dwelling on there, but that, I don't know if there could be a petition to the state to change it, that if you agreed to farm sustainably for 10 years or something, I don't know, you could put a house on there.
So maybe we want to devise a goal that you can create some policies from. These are aspirational about what do we do to encourage a situation where you don't have to have all of this financial means up front.
Reduce regulation.
Well, or at all, because a lot of times farming isn't very profitable. So
Yeah.
you shouldn't have financial shouldn't be part of the barrier ever. Like in that, beyond the reality of life, but we as the administrative process shouldn't put financial barriers before financially weak people.
So that would be a recommendation from.
Yeah, definitely. I think.
So, what does your group think about that?
Reduce regulation. Rules kill.
Oh,
Well,
that's good to know. And I'll put that-
No.
And I'll put that nuclear reactor next to your house. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Please,
I think what I wanted to throw out on, believe me, I've bumped into plenty of the regulations for myself. What I'm worried about, and again, it's a piece of what you just said, is okay. So you reduce the regulations, or try to make this whole thing more friendly for people with less money, but how do you then still prevent the fat cats from jumping in? We don't even have to spend as much money now because, the regulation has changed. I don't know. I don't know if it's even possible. How do we favor the small average person versus the fat cats?
I think it's possible.
Yeah,
I mean, strategically possible.
is that possible to build that in?
That's always
somehow?
been that's always been.
Well, I don't even know if you have to build it in, because one of the things that that Brady mentioned is that this is smaller, it's more labor intensive, it's artisanal, artisan, thank you. The uber big guys aren't interested in that.
No, they don't want 5
No.
acres or.
And they're also not interested in farming in Clatsop County
Right, because it's
because it's too complicated.
It's hard. It's hard. So yeah. So actually, I don't know even have to worry that. I don't think you have to worry about making it. I mean, all the regulations should be easily enforceable, and they should be fair and equitable and clear and concise. So you can't knowingly exclude somebody. But I think just by creating just by looking at what kind of farming we have here, those are not the entities that they want it easy. They don't want small things that work hard at.
Yeah, maybe I'm responding to, I did interview and visit with a prominent neighbor in my area after the last meeting. And one of the things, and he had actually been a part, I was trying to encourage him, knowing that we needed an extra person, to come into this committee because of just his just long-term understanding of the area over there at Hamlet Road. His feeling is that the way the regulations flowed is that it just favored warehousers and, of course I'm thinking more forest now rather than ag, but it just favored these big moneyed entities coming in and just buying up all the little 20 and 40, 50 acres to
Like Simon Vincent.
Huh?
Like Simon Vincent or whatever.
Yeah. And so, it may, maybe I'm often at a different track thinking forest versus ag, but, the fact that you can flip back and forth, I still worry and wonder if, the moneyed entities can't just come in and, flip something on its head. And so that it still aces out the small time, and I don't know.
Diane, you have a thought?
Finances are not a protected status, so we can discriminate any way we want in regard to that.
Okay.
I know that the land use wants to.
Why not?
Let's jump on down.
Taxing structure.
Let's jump on down to this third bullet.
Okay.
Can I say one more thing before on the
Sure.
zoning?
Yeah.
Quick.
The one thing that I think is integral in the thing is that Oregon state law streamlines farming and protects that streamlined process legally. And that's the problem that we run into in the county, even when we want to regulate. So like, for example, I'm living on the property. The county regulation doesn't allow it, but the state regulation allows it. So therefore, you have to just ignore it and do it. In that process, it looks kind of silly, like this thing, because here's what needs to be done, being done. So for me, I made the decision, okay, well, I can build a house, like this. So I'm going to try to rewrite the business plan to put funds ahead. And then I started looking at it, and my business plan was becoming top-heavy. And then I stepped back and thought of the four-person rule. And then I said, oh, okay. Then I looked at state law. We went to legal, and it was pretty straightforward. Just keep doing it. The state law, that was the point on zoning. The zoning is, right, the zoning is state. It all interacts with state, and farming is regulated by the state.
But you're saying the rules don't match. County doesn't match state rules.
No, not at all, and they almost never do. But then there's this big process that, and then like came up in the agriculture meeting, there's very little, the wealthy people that farm just steamroll the process because they know they can. The poor people that farm don't know they can steamroll the process, so they don't. And if you look at precedent, there's very little precedent because nobody ever sues anybody about it because the state law is so strong in favor of farming that anybody that fights it loses. So it's kind of a funny thing that, we disempower poor people because the wealthy people, the wealthy corporations, the big money ones are always going to know the law to the T and know how to take advantage of it. And the poor people are never going to know that unless we tell them, hey, we've created an open road for you. Come this way.
Education.
Good. I still want to hear about this. How can the county balance demand for increased affordable housing with requirements to preserve and protect agricultural resources? Affordable housing.
And if you can solve this in 10 minutes, then we'll go ahead and take it back and solve the world's problems this afternoon.
Great.
Yeah.
This is a big, bad question.
I know it.
Yeah.
So
Higher density?
Well,
You're talking about inside the urban growth boundary,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
we're not in, none of us is in an urban growth boundary.
Or maybe even out here.
We just need to have flexible zoning that allows for people who are line cooks, dishwashers, wait persons, loggers, people who aren't bringing home
school teachers.
$85,000 a year to live on a 5-acre parcel or a 2-acre minimum with 4 tiny houses, 1 well, 1 septic. A small little CCR place.
Little cluster development with a
little
shared,
village.
shared driveway, shared
Think of
utilities.
Exactly. Think of the road situation then, that these people are not going to be driving to Seaside to their little studio apartment to come out and work in the forest or do dishes at the elderberry or wherever. They're going to be able to be a half a mile or 2 miles from where they work.
Yeah. Well, I'm kind of trying to follow that a little bit. Is it okay if I say something?
Sure.
Okay. So one of the things I've noticed just this year, in fact, is that the stress the trees are experiencing along the roadway. And I see that stress with something I had never seen before, and that's tent caterpillars. So thinking of this whole thing about trying to increase residential is the farmland that's like right on some of these roads, like 26 or whatever, is that really quality farmland? Given the emissions, the air quality, the runoffs, the whatevers. And so could we strategically, set aside places like, I'm just using that as a...
Marginal lands, that's what marginal lands were for to begin with.
Yeah, and maybe that needs to be reassessed other than just where it's located. That it's not 1950 or 73 or whatever. So, anyway.
I was thinking on that the Simon Vincent thing comes back into play, I guess, because of the intention of the laws that allowed the big forestry companies to own all of the land in the mountains. Obviously exaggerating, but
Not too much.
but what essentially happened there was, on the one hand, they're supposed to provide railroads, right? So that was Weyerhaeuser and whoever ended up with those lands. Well, we don't have the railroads anymore, so I guess we lost on that one. But we had the railroads long enough to take the timber away. The law was set to, so for example, Benson had nothing to do with railroads. They used the colonization thing, and they brought tons of people from San Diego. Didn't actually bring them, but they were able to do this scheme that allowed them to claim just massive, in a strategic way, massive parcels of land until they all of a sudden owned everything. And then that's all of a sudden a big bunch of land that that needs to be managed by a big, massive forestry corporation. Agroecology is about people living symbiotically on the land.
Yes.
That was the original intention of the law.
Yes.
That was how all those forestry companies got the land, was because the intention was to give people access to the land. So on the one hand, if we're talking about the people who are working, like me, I'm a server at Newman's, so I work in that industry. If we're talking about, we have a huge deficit in Seaside, in Cannon Beach, for example, for the people to do the jobs that need to be done in the summer. Well, that's a whole different question than how to, the people that are working primarily at a restaurant in Cannon Beach or Seaside are mostly a problem that needs to be solved by Seaside and Cannon Beach, not by the countryside surrounding, because the farmland is supposed to be associated to, the forest and farmland is supposed to be associated to people who are interacting in some way with that land in a way that also interacts with the society. So if we want to be a hermit and go up to the mountains, that's not really what the law was designed to provide for. It was designed to provide for a network of people living on the land in a productive way in 2019 in an ecologically regenerative way. And so that's the answer that I would say to the housing thing is, the housing is all the people that are in the industries that are, like timber, for example. Well, timber is kind of like it's a very simplified concept, but the resource of the forest is a very complicated and dynamic thing. It takes a lot of people to take advantage of the resource of the forest in a way that actually benefits the forest too. And those people can't live 50 miles away or 30 miles away. They have to live in that environment. So the regulation, around how to allow people to live in the environment in a way that also doesn't allow them to take advantage of that to where it pollutes or it degrades or whatever, that's the question I think we have. We don't need to keep people off the land. We need to facilitate people coming onto the land in a beneficial way, and that's the housing. And we don't need to tell them they have to build this house or that house. We need to say that you could live in a tiny house if you want. If that's all you can afford, you can. It's 2019.
Yep.
It's a booming thing, And we need to quit excessively regulating the things that are simply bureaucratic process and start regulating the things that have 2019 benefit and need.
Question. How versed are you guys at tiny houses?
We field
We're
questions
learning.
about them on pretty much a twice-a-day basis.
Sewer and water and whatnot?
Are you asking what does a tiny home require?
Yeah.
Okay. So
Big
basically, a tiny home, we don't really care how big your house is.
Okay.
We don't care. I can't stress that.
How about, well, it's got to have
It's
wheels.
going to have, no, it doesn't. There we go.
Okay.
We don't care how big your house is. We do care that it's sitting on wheels, because if it's sitting on wheels and it has a license plate on it from the DMV, it's not a house.
Right, yeah.
Now it's a trailer. So now it's a recreational vehicle. So now we have an issue with you. However, if you have something sitting on a foundation and it has cooking facilities and sleeping facilities and toileting facilities, I don't care if it's 60 square feet. If you can get all that in 60 square
Sure.
feet, do it.
Composting toilets.
You would need to take that up with the septic folk.
And how do the septic folk feel about that? I bet
You would have, no, I don't.
Oh, really?
No, no. If it is something that will pass building codes and the environmental health department, if they can sign off on it, if you have potable water, drinking water, 250 gallons per day, then we don't, no, if it's a house, if it meets the definition, if it has the resources that are necessary for a house, if it has the cooking facilities, it has potable water, toileting facilities, and you have some sort of I'm going to call it a septic system, but it can be, there's different varieties. And some people are getting their water in other means too. I mean, some people are collecting rainwater. We just have a requirement that you need 250 gallons a day of it. Now, some people are managing that by using cisterns or tanks. They're storing it. So we have people who are building houses that are a couple of hundred square feet. You can do that.
Yeah, but putting multiples of them on the same
There we run
parcel,
into some problems.
that's
Yeah.
currently not allowed.
Right, we're
Yeah.
still stuck with, oh, it's an RA2 zone, 2 acre minimum, you get one house. We don't care if it's 200 square feet or 2,000 square feet.
Yeah, and that's, yeah. I'm kind of going back to your financial thing and okay, I'm looking at maybe putting a small addition on my house. At current prices, a small addition on my house, very, very simplistic. I just want a nice sunroom, this kind of thing, costs more than the original cost of the house 20 years ago. So I'm back to this and back to the wheel thing. Just getting foundations and things. I mean, I'm talking a sunroom. I'm not even talking a kitchen or plumbing or, maybe some electrical. The costs are almost prohibitive, I think, for the average lower, somebody that isn't making six figures.
We should talk about enforcement.
And so I'm worried about this wheel thing, because that could be just how people start their farm, is they're living on wheels until they can really eventually.
And is it recreation, for example? Recreational vehicle is a claim, and I think that's the intention of the law. We're in a county where you don't want everybody that wants to tourist over here to be able to camp out in every field and everything. There's an intention around it. It's not a dumb law, but a recreational vehicle isn't according to the licensing, it's according to the use. Mm-hmm. Is this a farm worker housing, or is this and for example, that's where it runs into Oregon state law with standard farm practice. But the thing I wanted to bring up is a lot of the bureaucratic process is sort of like when you end up with a big mess of stuff that because you kept fixing and fixing and fixing, and sometimes you have to step back and say, oh, okay, well maybe we kind of need to build something beside this that will enable us to kind of slough this off, because it's getting to be too much of a hodgepodge of. That's what bureaucracy is essentially, and that we don't need to regulate what somebody's kitchen looks like, or what somebody's, a lot of the things that are required, we have to get past thinking that that's anybody's business. We have to get past that, because we have a lot more important things to do, and we're not going to get them done if we're focused on somebody's, having enough room between the toilet and the wall.
How many bedrooms you got?
Some of that's health and safety, so I understand some of that as far as building codes. I've lived in areas where there's been some really big earthquakes, and you see places where they don't have good building codes, so some of that kind of stuff is health and safety. But a lot of it is maybe over the top, like how far the toilet can be from the wall. Do I understand correctly that tiny houses can be built to standards? One, if they're on wheels, they have the minimal insulation. They're built to an RV standard, right?
I'm going to defer to the building official on standards for single-family dwelling, and to the Department of Motor Vehicles on what they will license for a recreational vehicle. We basically are going to look at it and say, how is it approved? Is it approved through the Department of Motor Vehicles with a license plate? It's an RV. Is it approved through the building official as a single-family dwelling, regardless of its size? It's a dwelling.
Okay, and
How does that, I was wondering, so you have a tiny home, you get a lot. What if you have access to drinking water, municipal water some way, and you create your leach field and septic for this tiny home? Is that?
And that's, if you put it on foundation and get the agencies to sign off, then it's a single family dwelling.
Right.
but what if it's on wheels?
Take the wheels off.
Even though it's built to a different standard.
You
So
are
that's,
going to have to see what the building official has to say about it.
Yeah.
He has concerns about things like wiring and insulation
Oh, yeah.
and all kinds of, I've heard David Kloss, our county building official, up at the counter having this discussion. And, I was working with somebody else recently, and so I was doing two things at once. I was trying to multitask, which means I didn't do either of them very well. But so I was helping one person over here with something while I was listening to David on the topic of what's the difference. And the things that he was talking about with regard to a recreational vehicle, he said it's not designed to live in day in and day out. And yes, I know, he said, people put them in parks and they do that. But that's also where you see fires and things like that. And so he started talking about some of the different hazards. But he talked about wiring, and he talked about insulation, and all of these different elements. And he said the RV, and that I'm really paraphrasing in a very short period of time, the RV is really truly not designed to be a permanent long-term dwelling. It's not created that way. That doesn't mean that you can't take one apart and do things to it to make it comply with the building code. He also said by the time you get finished doing that, it will have cost several times what a house would. And you see that with people doing some of the stuff. There's some glamping where they're taking Airstream trailers and they're redoing them. Oh my gosh, you can have a $500,000 Airstream just like that.
So is there any room in planning here in the plan to maybe try and allow some of the homes on wheels that are built to the RV standards on lots? Because that would keep costs down.
And put them in a campground. That's what our code is going to let you do now.
Right.
Some of the resource lands allow campgrounds. So there are those sorts of ways of doing things. Also, I think you can't stay more than 30 days in a campground, if I recall correctly. So if there are aspirational goals that you would like to see, this is what we're asking you to devise.
Yeah.
Is to come up with aspirational goals. What would you like to see? So would you like to see something where there's some flexibility built into some stuff? So do you want to devise those kinds of ideas?
Like I'm thinking, okay, the owner wants to have a regular home there eventually. Maybe a time-limited permit for the RV, and saying, okay, you can do this for 5 years or something like that, and then it has to, you either have to leave or you have to have a permanent home
Because we
or
have
something.
that, it's a temporary use permit.
Is it like 6 months still?
Well, so a temporary use permit is good for a year. It can be renewed up to 4 times, so that's 5 years. But a temporary use permit is not to circumvent the land use ordinance. It's to solve a problem short term. So sometimes what people do is, and they qualify to do it because they've pulled building permits, they've gotten started. They've maybe got the septic system there or something, and they're working on the house. And so they can live in an RV hooked up to that septic system, I might add, for this extended period of time, as long as they've pulled their building permits, and then they can keep renewing them. And some people do renew them for several years while they work on stuff.
But that's costly to renew.
Actually, that's all the necessary bureaucracy. The RV, as a temporary, whatever, we just need to step aside and just not even have the discussion. Like I'm saying, it's a standard agricultural practice. In agricultural practice, it's exempt from county regulation. So why are we trying so hard to regulate it? We can have that regulation towards non-agricultural practice, and it's not exempt, and that's already done. Towards agricultural practice, we should just, make sure everybody understands that it's exempt, and then it's out of our hands. It's not in our hands to regulate that. And the other thing is, it's not true it's not really true that you can't build more residences, for example, and I'm thinking of the big ag kind of people. So that's something that I said they steamroll over things. I dealt with a farm when I was building up in Klatskanai that had 200 people living on their farm because they were a big industrial farm, and because they were really big, they knew how to steamroll the process, and it's all legal because it's standard agricultural practice. I think we should spend our time discussing how to, like when you herd sheep, the artisan of shepherdry, you take them to the best pastures so that they eat, you don't just let them range around because that degrades landscapes. You herd them in such a way that it builds up the landscape. And we should design our policies to fully enable like the original intention of the land, which is getting people to live on the land in a productive way that ties a community together. So we don't have to rely on big forestry, to support us. And at the same time, we should design it so that it creates, it's sort of like a paradigm. A paradigm creates a slant that causes the average bell curve to go a certain direction. So the things that we do in the comprehensive plan are going to create a slant that the bell curve of the people living in the county are going to fall down into that direction. And that should just be regenerative, kind of agroecological dwelling on the land, and we shouldn't, you know what I'm saying? So otherwise, when people pull aside, and then big industry comes in, like big forestry has overrun our county, right? And it's tied in with dollars and everything, but we need to get the people involved in a way that replaces big forestry. And so all the things that we do right now are not a reason to say, okay, this is how it's done, in my opinion. Like, you see what I'm saying, Julia? Like this is what happens right now, but this process completely doesn't work for agricultural and forestry land use in our county. We have to make something that works. So we have to be able to step aside while we have that in process and build something that actually will work. And all the different complicated ways of doing things that aren't working aren't really that important. What's really important is designing something that prioritizes what we want the county to look like.
Yes. So I'm thinking the chair is probably going to look at the agenda and start reining us in here because we're just about...
Well, I have to go. I have to go to work.
That was good public comment.
So I'd like to just make sure that I've got one kind of thing down for Victoria's notes. And that is something that came out of a couple of the other CACs. They looked at the ag lands goal that we have currently and found that it was dismissive of agriculture and basically said, I'm sure you looked at it in your goal 3 stuff, and that it basically sort of said, yeah, you can do agriculture here, but it's hard and there's not very much land for it. And so if you want to give it a try, okay, but it's going to be hard, so don't bother. And they found it dismissive. And so I'm thinking that you probably, based on your discussions and talking to Brady today and maybe some other things that you just know in your personal lives, would like to see it be a little bit more encouraging to small farmers.
Yep.
So we would, when we're devising some of the language that we're looking at, we're looking toward being more encouraging in our goal 3 language. And so I'm just kind of looking around and I'm seeing a consensus that it's yes.
I'm pretty excited with what he had to say.
Yeah, good. Okay,
about that.
so I'm thinking then Ron probably wants to move a little bit over.
What would happen? We need to review meetings and dates coming up.
So next meeting will be November, the 3rd Tuesday as usual at 10 a.m. Is that still, the 10 a.m. still okay with everyone?
Correct.
I basically just pry myself out of bed, but that's okay. I'm a swing shift person.
So that would be the 19th.
Yeah.
Okay,
We're
so
looking at the wrong, sorry.
11:19, is that what you said? 11:19, so 10 a.m.
That's good because isn't Thanksgiving like the week following, isn't it? Like
I believe so.
way at the end of November.
And then we'll discuss Christmas at that time.
So I think you probably, if you're amenable, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, we'll be taking December and most likely January off.
So
And then we'll jump back into Goal 5
okay.
in February, and at some point we will then have another DLCD presentation on Goal 5.
So the 19th meeting will discuss December and January.
We'll confirm.
Confirm.
Mhm.
Okay.
And Goal 4.
Right.
Yep.
So we're discussing Goal 4 on the 19th.
Yes, ma'am.
and distribute background material for the next meeting. Good luck.
I hope I wasn't disrespectful or anything when speaking.
No, no.
I wasn't as well prepared as I could have been.
Oh, it was wonderful.
That was,
No, thank you
yeah,
very much.
like, I've just really enjoyed what you've had to say. Ron, I have to go work. I'm going to be in Cannon Beach in 20 minutes,
Right?
so.
And
Hi. Hi.
closing
Good
comments.
to see you again.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for
Yeah,
coming.
thank you, Brady.
Anything else for us?
Closing it up.
Oh, closing it up.
Can we get a motion to adjourn the meeting?
It was,
I move to adjourn the meeting.
Can I get a second?
I'll second that. That doesn't sound too scary.
All in favor? Aye.
So what, Victoria, what do so if, what's your name again?
Mindy.
Mindy. So Mindy's interested in being a participant from my area. Is it possible to entertain that if you were interested?
Well, I don't know if we've gotten any applicants. I just got back from vacation.
Oh,
Today's my first
okay.
day back.
And yeah, I wouldn't be, it wouldn't
First
have been
morning.
anybody that I knew, so I
Yeah.
kind of forgot.
So
that might be the
I'll check
person.
with Gail and I'll shoot you an email today. See if there's a possibility of reopening.